So David's going to talk to us now about where estates and low-income communities fit into the Church of England's strategy, particularly around the younger and more diverse bold outcome, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. So David.
Thank you, Lynn. Hiya. How are you doing? So I am particularly upset that Dave Champness is not here. I heard the ooh when he wasn't, because the last time I was with Dave, we were arguing about injustice, how we do something about it. He went into the Blackburn home end, I went into the Coventry away end, and our goalkeeper scored a 94th minute equaliser. So for those who follow football, that was a truly unique moment, and he's not here. But I will relive it with him next time I see him. So I'm David Bright. I hate talking about myself, so I won't bore you with my background, but I started in Oxfam and Oxfam International, head of economic justice, and through some strange, bizarre set of circumstances, I find myself as the head of funding and learning in the Church of England. I'm always, for full exposure, I worship in a Baptist church, but I'm always amazed when I talk to any of my Anglican brethren. Very few people in churches know the vision and strategy, which I always find interesting, because our life tends to be, Kemi and my life tends to be living and breathing this. But I'm sure you all know the vision of the Church of England for the 2020s is that we become a church that is centred on Jesus Christ and shaped by Jesus Christ through the 5 marks of mission. And through a process, deliberation was brought with 3 priorities identified for the 2020s. To become a church of missionary disciples, I'll assume you know what that means, where the mixed ecology is the norm, not one size of church fits all, and a church which is younger and more diverse. Amen. So the 6 bold outcomes were set as targets to achieving that. And I won't list them all through there, but as you see, doubling the number of children and young people by 2030 in the Church of England. No small feat if that gets achieved. And particularly for us as people who feel called to serve those with the least, to bring life in all its fullness in the name of Jesus to deprived communities, a church that fully represents the communities we serve in age and diversity. And then the other 4 outcomes. But I'm going to focus in on those, as Lynn and Dave asked me to, those first 2, and give some data behind it. So in our team, we do various things, but we have the privilege of distributing some national funding, and we work particularly closely with dioceses. So what has changed with the new approach from national funding? The approach has really gone, if I was to sum it up in secular terms, where I come from and learnt my funding background, is we're moving from a project approach, doing some good projects, to a strategic approach, divined with God and led by the Spirit. So we are looking to a greater ambition to transform our church, because the numbers on the left are, to say the least, challenging. So we are looking to turn around a 24% drop in church attendance over the last 10 years. Attendance per capita of 1.2%. That's roughly 30%. And so on and so forth. And so every diocese we deal with, probably our bar 3 or 4, are a mix of city, market town and rural. So this is a made-up image. Brownie points for anyone who recognises where it is. But this is the conversation we will have. And we will do a lot of analytical work to try and show where there are churches, where people are attending, and who they are, what they look like, and where they come from. So we start with this, as we try and divine God's lead, what does the current situation look like? We know really well what with the evidence that we've now got. We've been funding since 2014, And if you needed this evidence, I think this would be something, even if I asked you the question, you would probably feedback. We know what good looks like locally to get flourishing going on in our churches. Effective leadership, a proactive and flourishing culture, and the capacity to deliver it. If we get those things in place, we see what we want to see in our churches. And I can talk you through the evidence, if you would like it to be more evidence-based. We can show where we have made those investments, made those changes, growth is happening, and that vision that we described of being younger and more diverse and representing the communities we serve becomes a reality. Now, how does the vision and strategy really work for those in low-income communities? Let's just give you a couple of stats. Hopefully you may be aware of these stats, maybe you're not. So we want to double the number of children and young and active disciples by 2030. 62% of young people under 19 live in the 2,640 estates in England, which represents about 21% of our parishes. So the question that we ask, do the analytics, what does it look like for your diocese? And then we say, well, what are we going to do if we want to double the number of children and young people, and 62% of them live in these places? And we go from there. Secondly, we say that we want a church that fully represents the communities we serve in age and diversity. I don't know if you can read those numbers. I'm getting pretty old and I struggle. But you might see another red circle. So in that bottom picture of the quintiles, broken down into population broken down into 20%, this is where the current spending of the church goes. So our current position, where the church is, it looks like this. £7 ministry spend per head in the most deprived quintile. Moving to £16 per head in the fourth wealthiest quintile. We have a structural bias in the church. So we do the analytics, we lay the data before, we sit in prayer and we say, what are we going to do about this? Because the vision and strategy asks for every person to be able to access a form of church by 2030. So just, I think God is a God of numbers. I'm not very good at numbers, but I love seeing the patterns that God paints. And there's some pretty stark patterns being painted. So what do we then do about that? Our team will then try and draw from evidence what we've seen working, and we are trying to get sharing lessons learned, what God has blessed, where the Spirit has led people, to share that between dioceses. It's not the most, I would say, sharing between dioceses has not naturally happened. So, we're seeing a lot more of it. Ask Mark Powley about his view about what we might do about that. But we are starting to see, and we are playing the small part we can. But here's a real example. So we said, as another outcome, a parish system revitalised for mission to reach and serve everyone in their community, to which the priority is around children and young people. So we worked with Worcester Diocese, with our embedded consultants, sharing. We brought together other dioceses. They heard from other dioceses what they are doing is, and they came up with this strategy. And I won't bore you with the previous pictures, but the current picture in Dudley was pretty stark if you were a young person trying to find a thriving expression of church. That is their picture that they want to take it to. They've done the analytics. They've tested where they feel God is calling leadership, the capacity is required, and we are supporting a plan where we will be building 8 expressions of church that will be particularly through revitalisations, through resource churches, through new plants, new worshipping communities. We don't have one approach. We go with the best approach that we can take. That plan has been put in place across a mix of traditions and contexts. But if you know Dudley serves quite a lot of deprivation in that area. And so that picture is one that fills me, and hopefully the God of numbers, with a lot of hope. We have then put out another bold outcome, that we will create 10,000 new Christian communities, recognising the 2019 Synod motion. Rob, it was 2019, agreed to establish a loving, serving and worshipping community on every significant social housing estate by 2030. So again, we sit in prayer and we ask the question and we do the data and we find out. The picture on the left is a real picture. The picture on the right is the proposal that we want to support of how that diocese is going to target this city, City X, and in 10 years to try and revitalise, to plant, and to form a thriving expression of church in their estates. And so, again, for the God of numbers, I hope that will be a really hope-filled and exciting future if God manages to bless it. And I say all these things in the full knowledge that nothing's going to happen without God. Money takes us just so far, and I am always a bit embarrassed standing before you as someone who has a deep faith, thinks it is all about what the Holy Spirit will drive, but I'm here to talk to you about money. So there we go. Then moving on. So what Dave said is there's going to be a bunch of people in the room who will have a bunch of questions and don't know what was agreed in 2023 and 25 about it is called the Strategic Mission and Ministry Investment. So here's some headlines and that beautiful picture on the right. Anyone know where that beautiful picture on the right is? Rochdale. And I was looking at the evaluation around Rochdale and I found this fantastic note made where in prayer, before any of the money was given, anything happened, the leadership sat there and one person was noted, nothing good comes out of Rochdale. And it was this moment where, you know, your heart breaks with that kind of vision. That comes out of Rochdale, something I am deeply proud of. And it's a fantastic place if anyone has been there, but that was a complete plant in Rochdale. So the investment is a long-term commitment over 9 years, and the church works in 3 years. I don't really understand why, but we talk in trienniums. So the amount of money committed for this triennium, 2023 to 25, is £350 million. How eye-watering is that number? That number is about 4% of the church's economy. So it's a tiny amount of money with what the church has, but the way we see that money is it's to be catalytic. It's to be really catalytic, to transform and to bring hope and to bring around change. So what does the new programme look like? The new programme is shaped by a desire for simpler processes while holding accountability of where the money goes and that it's additional. There is the diocesan investment programme. That's where the vast majority of the money goes, and it goes in two ways. 240 million is given by proposals that dioceses create and bring forward and are assessed and evaluated and prayerfully taken forward. Then 100 million goes through the lowest income community funding. And forgive me if everyone knows this stuff, but that is given in a block grant to the 27 dioceses with the most deprived contexts. It's not entirely true because London doesn't fit because of its wealth. It doesn't get that money. So it doesn't serve all deprived contexts, but there's a formula by which it works, and 100 million of that goes. So dioceses receive that slug of money. And then there's a very, very small amount of money, which we hope to be very catalytic, called the People and Partnerships Funding. And we fund partners of the church in that way. We have funded there's a couple of people I've met today who've been funded through that route, through the predecessor innovation funding. That's closed funding at the moment, but its priority is around children and youth. So that is the picture of what the Vision and Strategy Funding team, the monies that we distribute. And I don't know if people have ever seen this picture, but I was talking earlier, I moonlight. I've worked on economic policy for about 20 years. I've been battling with various governments to try and challenge the neoliberal economic consensus. It's kind of the geeky thing that I do and have done for quite a while. I love this picture because every institution in this country, bar a couple, is running away from all the places that have the red dots. Grimsby, Rochdale, the Medway towns, parts of Plymouth, parts of Bristol, whereas the church is actually investing in these places. And I'm trying to work with the public affairs team to make a bigger picture of how we are investing where government and others are receding. But let me give you a couple of pictures of, give you some good news. And the real big good news is I hear people talk about church in decline. I think we have to talk about a church that is in decline and growing, because we have evidence now that where that investment is made in the ways that we talked about, growth is happening. We're seeing some extraordinary things that God is blessing. And so to date, the previous form of funding, Strategic Development Funding, SDF, supported 92 projects. And I was talking to my friend over there from Blackburn, where we were investing in Blackpool, the most deprived context in the UK. And we have 198 million has gone towards those 92 projects. And funds is continuing to be distributed right now to 77 of those projects. Because the average length of our funding is 6 years, which again, from my world, funding world and program development world, that doesn't happen. You don't get funding for that long. So what the church is doing is extraordinary, the scale of the funding and the longevity of it. Impact from that was identified from the independent review. I'm not going to read it out, but it was pretty much, it's challenging culture of fair shares for all and saying, where can we really make a difference? It is biased towards low-income communities, and above all, it is showing that the church can grow and there's real hope for what God is doing. It's stimulating a new approach. We've had challenges. Where is God? Strategy is a very human concept, etc., but we are getting that view of how we can make a real difference by really working and seeing where God is working and going after those things. Not being the established church that we've been for several hundred years. And the impacts, again, in the God of numbers, we have funded 900 to 1,000 new worshipping communities to be formed. We've got around 26 to 27,000 new participants. If you wanted to be, when it was established, we said, you make your own outcomes, you define the outcomes. So it's been very hard for us to get aggregated numbers, and that's why you're getting these ranges. But those who said these are new disciples, people on the discipleship pathway, baptisms, we know 19,000 are part of that number. We just can't say whether the other bit of that number is actually that or not. And then to finish off, we've supported 4,000 to 5,000 new leaders, the vast majority of which have been lay leaders. And if we know anyone working in youth and children's work at the moment, we have a critical problem, and that critical problem is access to youth workers. And we do not have the people to do what we want to do. So some of the most amazing stuff we funded has been the training pathways and creating new leaders. We funded work in Southwark, we funded work in Blackburn, we funded in various places, and we're trying to spread that learning, because what we know in least lowest income communities, contextually appropriate leadership is absolutely critical, and the Church of England tends to be a middle class church. So getting those new leaders who are going to be effective in that place, that's a big part of what we're trying to support, creating those indigenous leaders that God is calling. And then against the link funding, we know that we've maintained roughly 1,700 parishes to maintain their current ministry and stipendiary clergy. Just to finish off, Lynn, should I finish off? How are we doing time-wise?
You're fine.
Yeah. Just to finish off, Sheffield, since these are a couple of my favourites, there's too many to pick, and I'm really sorry. It's always awful when you have a beauty parade and pick out your favourites, isn't it? I have 3 daughters. I know the problem. But these are 3 examples I thought you would like. Sheffield Centenary Project, really big programme in Sheffield, targeting deprived communities, started in 2015. We've seen a real focus on how they create family and youth workers, pull those forward, centrally employed but locally delivered and working, going into some really interesting work with schools about pathways through to establishing faith and discipleship, and equipping churches to get out there and engage their communities. And one of the pieces we've been working with the EETG on, and one of the things I'm hoping to do more this year, is there's a real challenge about resourcing into low-income communities and maintaining resources. It's how do you maintain social transformation, social mission work, social justice work, whilst delivering the gospel. And what we're seeing in a lot of our work is both are very hard to achieve. The Community Shed up in Carlisle, fantastic piece of work, reaching out to all those people that the gospel tells us we need to care about, be with and walk with, and bringing them together in new ways, basically around gardening these sheds and bringing them into a church community. And then to finish off, Link Funding is maintaining work into the Clifton estate. One of my biggest joys is to get these evaluation reports back. We had a Christmas Eve event. We had 400 people who don't know Christ, never touched a church, come through our house. 400! I mean, how? Thank God. You know, it's so exciting. I have the incredible privilege to reading all these reports. So, lucky me. And by the way, we will be writing up summaries of our evaluations, and the thing that we're launching in by the end of this quarter will be something called the Church Support Hub. We're going to be putting on a case study of every single piece of funding that we've given, the lessons being learned, and we're going to have a particular focus on low-income work in low-income communities. And I thought I'd end with 3 things. What our analysis we drew out when we did a meta-evaluation of the 15 evaluations that we've got, and we took a lens, what does this mean for working in low-income communities? Church structures are biased against supporting low-income parishes. It's just the way we're built and the way we are. What our evidence shows is that once seen as part of the core business of a diocese and as part of a long-term strategy, success and God's blessings are evident. The barrier now we're experiencing is not should we, it's how do we. And one thing I would encourage the EETG is, I think you've been a brilliant advocacy movement, and I'm part of it, and I'm there, and I'm going to stand with you. But I think we really need to invest in what does good look like. We've got lots of people asking us questions about, yeah, I'm in. What does it mean? And we need to be able to answer that. Creating enough resources to enable fruitful ministry in low-income community. It is really challenging. We have link funding. Link funding right now probably isn't used as strategically as it should be. It really should. 61% of it goes to the bottom quartile of parishes. That's not great. The board is really, and whatever you can do, whether you be a focal lead or whatever you be, we really need to think more strategically how we use that money. But the amazing thing from our evaluations, if any of you are doubting this, and hopefully you're not, where resources follow strategy, average growth rates are as good or if not better than the church as a whole. So if anyone turns around you and say, this stuff is too hard, it takes too long, how are we going to do this? Nonsense. nonsense. The evidence is there, it works, and its growth rates are as good, if not better, than the rest of the church. And then lastly, there are not sufficient contextually appropriate leaders and discipleship pathways for people from deprived areas. I think I'm not saying anything most of you don't know. So we are really taking a good hard look at how do you create the leaders of the future? How do you get the lay workers that, to be in this work? And we'll be writing up what we've learned from many of those schemes. Thank you.